Hi, I'm Jenny. I'm an engineering manager at Prefect, and today we're going to be looking at some of the new features that my team has been working on.
The features are still in active development, so they may change slightly from what I'm demoing here. It also means we welcome feedback on these features and their future direction, so please do join our community or fill in the feedback forms available in the Cloud UI and let us know what you think. First, I'll be reviewing some of the code that we're using in this session and make a few small adjustments to the flows you've seen in other sessions. Then we're going to zoom out and look at how Prefect can help you gain a wider understanding of what's happening in your workspace by looking in more detail at our new metrics-powered runs page. We'll also take a sneak preview of how you can use deployment SLAs to improve communication around expectations for your workflows and better understand if your system is meeting them. We'll also dig into how you can use our new resources page to understand the blast radius of an issue with a certain resource, like a cached result stored in an S3 bucket. First up, here's the code we'll be running to fetch and process our data. We're using the Marvin Moneyball project, and of particular note for this session, we've got a few changes to help us take advantage of our new experimental features setup. In a couple of our tasks here, we're using result caching, and I've set the result cache here to recent games, and the cache further down here to game score. So you can see we've set a result storage key, and further on in the code, we've set our result storage to S3 results, which is our S3 bucket. Just to add, result caching is basically a way of checking if the data already exists so that you're not wasting compute time by running tasks that were completed just a few minutes ago. We can set an expiration to say how fresh we want our data to be. So here I have set a expiration for 50 seconds. In other scenarios, we could be happy with data that's a few hours old, so we could set the expiration to, for example, 3 hours. To make sure we can track the Lineage events created when we write to and read from storage, we've also set the experimental flag Prefect experiments Lineage events enabled to true. If you're watching this later in the year, that flag won't be necessary, but we're releasing this as an experimental feature now so we can get feedback from you all before we make it generally available. And then here in our deployment setup, we've got a service level agreement or SLA setting. This lets you set an expected duration SLA for the flow runs associated with your deployment and the severity of any violation of that SLA. So here you can see a severity of high for a shorter duration and a critical severity if our runs go over a longer duration. SLAs are meant as a communication tool to help teams easily recognize problems in the system and identify runs or groups of runs that are anomalies. We'll go into how that looks in the UI a little later. I'll also draw your attention to the tags I've got set at the bottom of my deployment YAML. We'll be using them for filtering in the UI later too. Okay, let's go back to the UI so we can see how you can use these additions to gain insights into what's going on with your workflows and your data. First up, I'm excited to dive into our new metrics-powered runs page. At present, this is still a feature preview, but you can turn it on by going to the feature previews in your profile. The new page gives us a set of workspace-wide metrics so we can see the total number of runs, the average duration of those runs, the success and failure rate of those runs, the lateness rate, and, hot off the press, the number of runs that have violated their deployment's duration SLA. I'll admit here that I added a sleep to some of my runs to deliberately cause them to violate their SLAs. If you look closely, you can find that in my code. So here, I can see at a glance that everything is running smoothly, or actually not running smoothly in this case. Now I can see, has our run count been steady over the last week? Not really. Has our success rate held steady or our failure rate held steady? Have there been any anomalies with how long runs are taking? And I'll flag here that duration can be a really important metric because there's a strongish correlation between duration and compute costs. So it can help identify areas where you may be spending more on compute than you expected. The default time frame for these metrics is a week, but we can easily adjust that filter to see what's happened in the last day or the last hour, or even what's coming up in the next hour. And I'll also point out, you remember we added tags to our deployment earlier. So here I can filter this view down to runs that are, for example, ones that I care about. So I added the Jenny tag, and now I can also use that tag to filter my runs. And I could use tags to filter my runs, not just by my name, but like by a customer or by a business area. Below the fold here, I can filter by deployment, flow, and work pool. So if I see any issues or areas I want to explore further, I can begin to drill down and really see what's up. One other thing I'll note here is that you can also still filter runs by state. So I can take out, for example, all my runs that completed and focus on the ones that had an issue. It's worth a short note here that filtering by state does not affect the overall metrics. Those are calculated separately to give you that overview, but as always, feedback on this is helpful. And the new runs page is really powerful for giving more insights into what is happening with workflows across your workspace. But what happens if the problem didn't occur because of your infrastructure or didn't neatly fit into a problem with a certain piece of code? And I'm just going to pull up a new page here to show you. Here we go. That's where this new page comes in. As you can see, it turns around our view of the workspace. Instead of a runs first view, we can now see individual resources like my S3 buckets that I was using for cache storage. We can see perhaps local file storage, database, tables, model registries, and we can explore the flow runs and workflows that are reading from and writing to those resources. So this lets us track and visualize those interactions in a whole new way. So if we go back to the Moneyball Marvin project, for example, we added caching to some of our tasks. And if we set a cache key, that cache key can be shared by different tasks and even different flows, so long as they all share a common result storage location. But if the data that is cached is incorrect or is corrupted in some way, then we might have a problem. We could have multiple runs from different flows pulling the data. In a runs first view of the world, finding the blast radius of that corrupted data would mean having an intimate knowledge of your cache keys and your flows, and perhaps going through run by run to find the affected areas. Instead, with this new resources first view, we can figure out the data lineage of that cache and explore its downstream data resources like another S3 bucket, local file storage, and see which runs are connected. So I've shown how the new runs page can give you great insights into the health of your system, and also how the resources page can give you that blast radius. But what if you don't want to sit monitoring your UI? This is where Prefect's automation suite is really helpful, because it helps you set up notifications and automated actions based from events. Automations consist of triggers, and actions. And we use events to trigger an automation, and many of the events we've looked at today, such as SLAs, reaching a certain metric threshold, custom events, and of course flow run failures, flow run state changes, and work pool and work queue statuses can all be used to trigger an automation. And then actions are the actions you want to take as a result of a trigger. So it could be used to send a notification, it could be used to call a webhook, it could be used to pause a deployment, run a deployment. Lots of different actions can also change a flow run state, etc. So today, let's go back. And let's take a deeper look at SLA-triggered automations. Since SLAs are still in active development, we're going to use a custom automation, but don't worry, it's still pretty simple. In a custom automation, we need to select the event that will trigger our automation. And for us, that is prefect.sla.sla violation. And once I've chosen the event that I want to observe, I can associate it with resources if I want. I'm just going to say all resources, and I can say how many times I want the event to happen before it triggers an automation. And here for ease, I'm going to say 1. You would probably want to put something higher than 1, but for here, we're going to say 1. And the next step is to decide what action I want Prefect to take for me when the automation is triggered. One option would be to perhaps pause the related deployment, so no further runs are created. The other option, which I'll demo here, is to send a notification. There it is. And I'm going to set it to email me if any of my runs violate their SLA. And then finally, we can give the automation a name and a description. So let's call this SLA violation email. Oops. If I could spell, we'd be doing better. There we go, and let's give it a description. And it's all set up. And so now I don't need to monitor my flows or my system. I don't need to be looking at the UI. Prefect will monitor everything for me. And thank you for joining us today. I hope you found it useful to learn more about some of our new and upcoming features and to see how Prefect can help you see beyond individual workflows and give a wider understanding of your system health and give you a high-level look at your entire workflow ecosystem. Thank you.